We are so happy to have join us today Dr. Anthony Thomas, his doctorate in nutritional biology from the University of California at Davis, and also has conducted postdoctoral research at the University of California at Los Angeles Larry Hillblom Islett Research Center. That was a mouthful. And his primary research interests include focusing on the influence of dietary and lifestyle factors on the pathogenesis of chronic cardiovascular metabolic diseases, including obesity, insulin resistance syndrome, and type 2 diabetes. He has authored and co-authored multiple peer-reviewed scientific manuscripts and has served as a referee with relevant expertise in the fields of nutrition, obesity, and diabetes from multiple scientific journals. And today we're so excited to have him on because we're going to talk about a subject that we haven't talked, I don't think, as extensively about, is particularly eye health in relation to the macula. Dr. Anthony Thomas, welcome.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you this morning.
Dr. Thomas, Peter Morrell, I was very pleased to meet you at the convention in Baltimore, and we had a great conversation and started talking about lutein and zeaxanthin and some nutrients for eye health, and seems like even mainstream, you get these mainstream vitamins in the drugstore, they highlight now with lutein and zeaxanthin. What are these nutrients and why are they so special to eye health?
Right, well, they're definitely gaining in popularity and public recognition, and lutein and zeaxanthin, I know those terms are mouthfuls themselves, but they're naturally occurring carotenoids in our diets, and carotenoids are these fat-soluble yellow, orange, and red pigment molecules made by plants, algae, and photosynthetic bacteria, and they have antioxidant properties, and our body doesn't make these compounds, thus we need to get them from the diet, and their role in plants is actually to protect the plant against light-induced damage, and they do that by quenching reactive oxygen species that are formed via light exposure to oxygen. And so there's actually many scientists out there now that are advocating that lutein and zeaxanthin, to a lesser extent, be considered vitamins because, one is they have an established biological role in the body, and that is they comprise something called macular pigment, which essentially acts as a shield to protect the macula, which is the functional center of the retina, the light-sensitive tissue within the eye, and it's important for vision. And it protects that against light-induced damage, particularly blue light, and this is this high-energy, short-wavelength light, and it's emitted by many of the devices we commonly use, so laptops, smartphones, computers, and artificial lighting in our house. So we're exposed to very high levels now, which most people can just look around and see. People are glued to their phones. They look at their phones prior to bed, and we are not used to having such exposure to this high-intensity blue light, and that can damage the macula. And people hear about age-related macular degeneration, and that's the leading cause of vision loss in modern societies. And the reason for that is because low levels of these macular pigments, lutein and zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin is the other form of zeaxanthin that's comprised in macular pigment. So, yeah, these are gaining recognition because they're so important to visual performance, but also protecting against vision loss.
I assume we can find these nutrients in foods, right? It's the old thing, eating carrots is good for your eyes.
Right. So carrots are rich in another carotenoid, beta-carotene, which is can be converted to vitamin A in the body. Lutein and zeaxanthin are less prominent in the diet, but also present in various food items, spinach, chard, kale, egg yolks, different sources. But in general, the U.S. population consumes less than 2 milligrams of these daily, and most research suggests that higher intakes of these specific nutrients are important for preserving visual function as we age. And so supplementation might actually be warranted. And in fact, more attention's even being paid to these compounds now in brain health and cognitive function on both ends of the spectrum. So in infants as well as adults, because it's the predominant carotenoid in the brain, despite not being the most prominent carotenoid in the diet. So it actively accumulates in tissues, the eye and the brain, and it serves very specific protective antioxidant functions there.
Now, do you find that a lot of patients tend to find out about macular degeneration or age-related macular degeneration when it is fairly far advanced, as opposed to in the earlier stages?
Right. I think a lot of people in general think of dietary supplements and things that may have therapeutic potential sometimes when it's too late, more as a treatment. I think we need to get rid of that mentality in our society and really think of it as the analogy of a car I like to give. It's really good if you want to keep your car running well to get regular oil changes and maintenance to it. You don't wait for the engine to die and then get the engine rebuilt, because yes, the car can keep working, but generally it won't work as well as it did before if you're constantly trying to fix it. And so consuming high levels of these particular carotenoids to maintain strong macular pigment and protect the visual function of your eyes is probably best when you're younger, before signs of problems occur, because again, they're preventing damage to the eyes. They're not necessarily helping the eyes recover. So once the photoreceptor cells, these are the cells that are directly sensitive to light, that these fat-soluble antioxidants are important in protecting, they can be damaged, and once they're damaged, they'd have to be recovered, but it's really better to prevent that damage from occurring in the first place.
And also with, the factor of brain health, how many children and adults are glued to either their computer, their iPad, their phones, like 24/7. They even walking around in the store, they're grocery shopping, they're glued to this phone.
Right.
This is potentially causing damage that, later on down the road for you, not only for your eye, but also for your brain, important to try and negate.
That's absolutely correct. In fact, my area of research at UCLA prior to joining the Jarrow Formulas team was actually centered on disruption of sleep-wake cycles via light exposure at inopportune times, so at night, and how this might is related actually to the development of chronic diseases. I was specifically focused on diabetes, and so this can have many adverse effects directly on the visual function of your eye, but also on your overall metabolism, because we're really adapted to the Earth's light-dark cycle. So, certain metabolic processes are primed to take place during the day, and then other ones at night. And when we're exposed to light, which you said, we're looking at our phones, more or less all the time, up into the point we go to bed. And this is very unnatural. We didn't evolve this way. So we've conquered the night with all these devices and lights, and we're exposed to light for much longer periods throughout the day. And in particular, a lot of the media technology, these tablets and our smartphones and laptops, devices that we use every day, myself included, it's part of my job. This exposes us to greater amounts of high-intensity blue light that we naturally weren't exposed to before. It is a component of sunlight, but we weren't exposed to such high levels.
So Jarrow Formulas has developed this macular protective factors, and again, we've talked about lutein and zeaxanthin, but this is a comprehensive formula.
Right. So this contains what the common ones, lutein and zeaxanthin, that you see, but it also contains a very potent amount, 10 milligrams of that other form of zeaxanthin that's present in the eye, mesozeaxanthin. Now, it's thought that mesozeaxanthin can be formed from lutein in the eye. However, if you directly supplement with it, you can increase levels in the eyes much more effectively. And And they're not all the same. In fact, lutein, zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin, those three in particular comprise what, again, macular pigment. And lutein kind of dominates in the periphery of the macula, whereas in the mid-periphery you have zeaxanthin, and in the very center of the macula, which is the highest concentration of those light-sensitive photoreceptor cells needed for vision, that's where you find mesozeaxanthin, and that's because it's probably of the three the strongest antioxidant, and that's the area with the vulnerability to oxidation because the concentration of photoreceptor cells is so great.
There's also astaxanthin that's in this formula. And what exactly is that?
So astaxanthin is another carotenoid, very similar in structure to lutein, zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin, and it's commonly recognized as one of the most potent antioxidants to protect against lipid peroxidation. And so astaxanthin, it's this red pigment color that you find in salmon flesh and flamingo feathers. It's what gives it their color. It's one of the few carotenoids, unlike beta-carotene, alpha-carotene, lycopene, that can, in addition to those macular carotenoids we talked about, that can cross the blood-retinal barrier. And research has shown that oral supplementation with astaxanthin can actually provide protection against oxidative stress in the eye to support visual function. So it's that combination of antioxidant carotenoids that cross that blood-retinal barrier and protect against lipid peroxidation that we've put in this formula that work together.
So pretty much anybody over the, I would say, anybody over the age of 40, 50 should be doing this? Well,
this is speculation on my part, but I supplement with something like this, something that maybe you can, these things, because the way that they're accumulated in the body, they actually can stick around for a little while. So you might want to supplement for a period of time, and then they'll be retained in the body for some period without supplementation. So it's probably a good idea to start supplementation early to build up macular pigment, as we age. But certainly, people over the age of 50 should really consider this because, again, loss of macular pigment and visual function is associated with increasing age, and so you'd want to maintain nice high levels of macular pigment by consuming these particular carotenoids in your diet.
Would it be something that would be beneficial for teenagers? You look at the teenagers today, they're, glued to their phones. Even in the middle of the night, they're, looking at their phones constantly, seeing if they got a text or whatever. Is this something that would be safe?
Oh, absolutely. This is something that is probably advocated for that population because of they would be considered almost a risk group because of that high exposure and high screen time. So again, this is something that might be appealing to them, not necessarily just to preserve vision, but it also can improve visual performance, such as improving something like contrast sensitivity, and that might actually translate to improve reaction time when they're doing their games or online, something like that. So,
or maybe,
I absolutely would recommend it.
Or maybe even testing in school, not only get the eyes functioning better, but also let's get those brains functioning better. And what is the dosage level for the Macular PF by Jarrow Formulas?
Right. So, again, this is a pretty potent formula. It provides 20 milligrams of lutein and 13 total milligrams of zeaxanthin, but 10 of that is specifically as that 1,4 mesozeaxanthin, which is kind of uncommon in dietary supplements. So it's particularly rich in that one, and then also 4 milligrams of astaxanthin. So a very potent formula of these. But we also have other lutein-containing products, and we had recently come out with lutein drops for kids. This is something that I actually put in my son's food to expose him, because lutein is gaining recognition as an important component for neural health and also the developing brain. You'll find it popping up in infant formulas now. Breast milk is a particularly rich source, but again, the amount in breast milk is directly related to mom's intake, and most Americans aren't getting enough of this naturally through the diet. Go figure when they're not eating that much many vegetables at one serving or less a day. So, and this is particularly rich in certain dark green leafy vegetables. So, I would always advocate for getting more fruits and vegetables into the diet, but when you can't, supplementation might be a nice safeguard against that.
So you're doing this for kids, not necessarily for the eye health, but for the brain health.
Right, for both, because, of course, visual function is important for brain development, but really they're finding that, in both adults and infants and children, lutein is the predominant carotenoid in the brain, but in children, it's about twice that as adults, and it accounts for over half of the total carotenoid content. So this really suggests that it plays an important role in brain development, and it's prominent in all brain regions that they've tested. So supplementation now, if babies cannot be breastfed and mom's not getting enough, they're starting to incorporate it into the diet because of what they think is a very important protective role. A lot of people will supplement now with the omega-3 DHA, this highly unsaturated long-chain fatty acid, but what they don't realize is that fatty acid in neural tissue like the eye and the brain is highly susceptible to oxidation because of all those double bonds. And so you need very effective fat-soluble antioxidants, and lutein actually co-localizes in regions of cell membranes that are enriched in DHA. So it's almost like the perfect antioxidant complement to DHA for protecting against oxidative damage. And it's important because DHA is important to the functioning of brain cells and those photoreceptor cells in the eye. So you need to protect it against oxidation.
So for children, taking the lutein kids eye drops that you put in you could put it in, like, can they take it directly in the mouth, or is it something you'd put in like a little bit of juice or a formula or whatever?
Yeah, you can eat it, because it's such a small amount, you could pretty much add it to whatever dietary source you like. But since it's a fat-soluble nutrient, I would recommend adding it to something with a source of fat. Say if you're giving whole milk or whole yogurt, or sometimes I'll make like an oatmeal dish that has ground up nut and milk in it, and that's what I mix it in for my son. So.
And so, again, we're talking about, as far as the Macular PF blue light formula from Jarrow Formulas, beneficial for, again, the macular, the eye, the brain, and then for children, the lutein kids drops, lutein plus kid drops, something that should be an essential component. Everybody talks about multivitamins, but this should be an essential component for everybody's health, because let's face it, most people don't eat that well.
Right. As I said, everyone could benefit from eating more fruits and vegetables, and I would still advocate for that. But, if you look at the evidence, the vast majority of Americans aren't getting enough relative to recommended intake levels, and it's unclear that even if they do eat recommended intake levels, are they getting sources that are particularly good sources of lutein and zeaxanthin? And the average intake in the U.S. is less than 2 milligrams. So this is a point where supplementation really can do what it says and be supplemental to the diet and fill that gap where you're missing, a critical nutrient in your diet that, again, has established biological roles. And certainly research is showing that intake of higher levels supports visual function and eye health. And now, again, they're looking at various aspects of brain health and development and finding that it may also play a role in protecting against cognitive decline and supporting cognitive functions as we age, and, of course, may be playing a role in brain development in addition to eye health.
Well, Dr. Thomas, we want to thank you so much for joining us today and informing us. I know we're all that's sitting here going, oh, this is something we need to do, as well as, grandchildren and teenagers and stuff. I think it's really important. And again, what you're looking for is the Macular PF Blue Light Formula by Jarrow Formulas, as well as the Kids Plus Lutein, the Lutein Plus Kids Drops. Again, the Lutein Plus Kids Drops by Jarrow Formula. And if you go to jarrowformulas.com, then you can find out more information. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects.
I'm sure we'll have you back.
I look forward to it.
Have a good weekend. And unfortunately, we've run out of time. We get right into the meat of these interviews, and then we're going to say goodbye, and it's unfortunate. Mm-hmm. So many other questions I wanted to ask him. But again, an important component, because prevention is the key. Once you have a problem, much harder to undo. And so something as simple as the Macular PF blue light formula for Jarrow for adults, at any age, get started on it. Start with one a day, or, depending on the situation, one twice a day. But for children, I think the lutein plus kids drops.
Well, and the thing, if, for those who didn't catch it, maybe this product hangs out in your body, so it's something that you could take for a while and then let it go for a while, and then get, you could take it intermittently, go through a couple of bottles a couple of times a year and keep up the levels in your system.
So eye health and brain health protection, why not?